Joining us now for our weekly partnership segment with The Lever is a reporter at that wonderful outlet, Matthew Cunningham Cook. Great to see you, Matthew.
Thanks for having me on, Krystal.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. So this is a bombshell that you dropped here. Got a lot of pickup. So I'm glad we're getting the opportunity to cover it as well. Go ahead and put this up on the screen. So Biden hikes Medicare prices and funnels profits to private insurers. The largest ever Medicare premium increase will pad the pockets of insurance executives who donated millions to the president's election campaign. Matthew, there are actually a lot of layers to the story, and there's a significant backstory here also regarding sort of FDA corruption and the approval of a drug, very expensive drug for Alzheimer's that doesn't actually really seem to work. Can you take us from the beginning of the story to how we end up with this largest ever Medicare price hike?
Yeah, so it starts, there's a bigger story where it's, we've seen for the last 50 years, we've seen this creeping privatization of Medicare, where the idea is that even though Medicare has set up a system to get insurers out of the equation, starting under Nixon and progressively expanded under every president, is this idea that, hey, well, maybe insurers could do a good job. Maybe, great grandma is using too much, going to the doctor too much, and insurers could help us solve that problem. So that's the bigger backstory. But since Biden came into office in June 2021, his FDA, over the recommendations of a scientific panel, approved this incredibly expensive drug, Aduhelm, that was produced by Biogen, that was a drug that was found to have not worked. But because of its enormous cost and because of poor modeling by CMS actuaries and potential conflicts of interest there, the Biden CMS used the drug to justify a world historic price increase for Medicare, where most people don't know that Medicare recipients do pay premiums. They're directly debited out of their Social Security check, and it went up by $20 a month. So that's a 14.5% increase in just 1 year. Again, all this media discussion about inflation will really hone in on workers' wages, but won't talk about the enormous growth in healthcare costs, with this Medicare premium increase being kind of the sterling example of that. So it was approved, caused a massive premium increase. Then Biogen got a bunch of flack, lowered the price of the drug. Then CMS got a bunch of flack, said that they would only cover the drug under very specific circumstances. And so Javier Becerra directed CMS to consider, well, maybe we should lower the premium increase, given the problems we've found with Aduhelm. And ultimately, they decided not to lower the premium increase, even though it was based on assumptions that were totally wrong, totally faulty, totally wrong.
I actually remember reading about this drug in depth. I think the New York Times did a big story about it a while back, and there were very real and legitimate questions about whether there was a sort of conflict of interest or corruption issue here that led to the drug's approval. Because as you point out, not only does the research not really show that the drug is particularly effective for Alzheimer's, but it shows it can have dangers as well, and then you add the expense on top of it. I never would have imagined reading that piece, though, that one of the implications would be a massive premium hike for all seniors who are dependent on Medicare. So you see this just ripple effect of how possible government corruption leads to hurting you in your pocketbook. And then the other piece of this that I just I literally can't understand is the political part. Like, you correct me if I'm wrong, the administration could decide, we're not going to hike premiums on seniors right before the midterm election, and they decided not to do that. Like, what? Really, what is the thinking that goes into that decision?
I've often said Democrats have a kink for losing, But I really do think that does play into this here. I think most of all is kind of, we see, cabinet secretaries senior CMS officials go to making extraordinary amounts of money when they leave the administration. And so I think that the core problem here is that top Biden administration officials are more interested in their next job than actually stopping Republicans. And so, I mean, you can see this with Jen Psaki, right? She was, negotiating her job with MSNBC while she was still press secretary. I think that really plays. I think that in DC, people are much more interested in having an Olympic-sized swimming pool than winning. I think that's what their definition of winning really is. It's one big club. So that to me, I think is kind of the real big issue here, is that they're not actually interested in winning, because if they were, then they wouldn't be doing things that materially make the lives of millions of seniors worse.
The other piece of this, Matthew, is a media story, which is I'm so grateful to you guys for the reporting that you all do. And you specifically, I think, have broken already a number of really important stories. This got a lot of traction online. There was clearly a lot of public interest. It was covered in a lot of independent outlets like our own. But yes, I haven't seen it picked up by the mainstream press when, again, I mean, this is a bread and butter issue. It's going to have a massive impact on a whole number of people. It illustrates a number of core issues here in DC, and there seems to be very little curiosity about it. What do you attribute that to?
Yeah, I mean, I was talking on our podcast about this, that when I started out doing investigative reporting almost a decade ago, also with David, I mean, we've been working together off and on for a long time. We used to have stories that would get a lot more pickup in the mainstream press, a lot more mainstream reporters reporting out what we were doing. And now that seems to have just not happen anymore. And I think that what we do here at The Lever that really folks are not interested in replicating is kind of hard-hitting economic reporting that speaks to the pocketbook issues of millions of Americans and avoids kind of culture war dislocations in favor of what's really impacting our elders, people who have worked their entire lives. And that to me is a big tragedy, because again, the other flip side of this is that, so in the midst of this massive premium increase, you also see in April an 8.5% increase in the payments to privatized Medicare Advantage plans. Again, meanwhile, while there's tons of doctors who are saying that they can barely make ends meet and keep their, private offices open due to Medicare payments issues, instead they're now engaging in a massive giveaway to insurers that run Medicare Advantage plans. So it's really a very simple story. I mean, the poor are getting poorer and the rich are getting richer. And I think that the story did well because it speaks to what every American can really witness with their own eyes, which is that economic inequality, even this year, is massively accelerating and creating enormous amounts of social problems and dislocation. And the only kind of response offered to it by the Democratic Party is more culture war stuff and not any type of real dedicated program to address the pocketbook needs of Americans.
I think that is all very well said. As always, we're extremely grateful for your reporting and for The Lever for existing. And we always recommend to our viewers that you guys, if you're able, I know things are really tough for a lot of people, but if you are able to do it, go and subscribe to The Lever because they are filling a need that is just extraordinarily important within our media realm. So Matthew, thank you for the great reporting. Guys, go check out more of their work and we will see you again next week. Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks so much for having me, Krystal.
Yeah, our pleasure. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you here soon. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.